So, hello and welcome. My name's Steve Nobel, and today I'm speaking with Richard Brennan on his book, The Alexander Technique Manual. Now, Richard has studied the Alexander Technique since 1983 and has been teaching full-time since 1989. He travels widely, giving talks and courses on the technique. He's a Director of Training at the Alexander Technique Centre based in Galway, Ireland, and he's a leading figure in helping people resolve back and neck problems. His belief is the root cause of most back pain lies in poor postural habits. So he is the author of this book, The Alexander Technique, and we're going to speak with him now on that. So welcome to you, Richard. Not everyone's heard of the Alexander Technique. Can you just give a description of what is it and what's it broadly for?
Yeah. Okay. It's quite a profound technique, but very simply, throughout our life we develop postural habits, and we go about activities with far too much tension in the body. And it's a technique where it makes people aware of the tension and gives you tools to let that tension go.
Right, brilliant. How did it all begin?
Well, Alexander was an actor, reciter in the 1800s, and he developed a voice problem. On stage, he started to lose his voice, and he tried everything, medication, exercise, but nothing seemed to help. And then he realized that it was something he was doing himself. So he studied himself. He looked and recited in front of and saw that he was pulling his head back with quite a lot of force, which was depressing the larynx and affecting his voice. And when he was able to see it and change it, his voice became perfect again. He went back onto stage and he started getting on with reciting again. And then his fellow actors started saying, well, I'm getting the same problem as you. So he started helping his fellow actors, and then doctors got wind of it, and then doctors started sending him patients that they didn't know what to do with.
Amazing. So in the book, you took, there's a section here that says taking responsibility. Many people carry on for years enduring unnecessary pain, not realizing that anything can be done for them. We need to face up to the fact that we have to take responsibility for our ailments and not expect other people to have all the answers. Now, of course, modern medicine, people go there for the pill and you know, the bitter solution, don't they? But this is asking us to take more responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, people don't advocate responsibility on purpose. Yeah. They just don't realise that they're doing something to themselves which is causing the pain. And I'm a pretty good example of that, because I had major back problems and sciatica for about 7 years, and it just got worse and worse and worse. My father's a doctor; he couldn't do anything. All the surgeons couldn't do anything. Then I turned to alternative therapies, and they didn't do anything either. And then I realized it was the way that I was sitting. I was a driving instructor at the time, and it's the way I was sitting in the car which was exacerbating the problem. So I would go to someone like a chiropractor, they put me back into place, and then I would go back into my old habits, and the back pain would be back within 2 days. Right. And it's only when I realized that what I was doing and it was able to change the way I was sitting that the actual pain went for good.
Right. Do you think is posture a major problem for a lot of people, do you think?
Absolutely. And the main reason is everyone goes to school. So everyone is bending over a desk between the age of 5 and the age of 18. So there's a lot of postural habits that get, you go into a classroom, everybody is actually bending their back as they're writing.
Yeah.
And then they just think that's normal. After it's actually 15,000 hours at school plus homework. That's a lot of time in a basically bad posture.
And a lot of people, of course, me included, sit at a desk for long hours a day over a computer or looking at a computer. So again, Alexander Technique is very useful for that. What kind of problems happen with this, with or is it kind of it just manifests in many type of ways?
Well, the most common is back problems.
Yeah.
A lot, 49% of the population in the UK and most of the Western world, 49%. That's nearly 1 in every 2 people have some sort of back problems every year.
Wow.
Okay, that's huge, but it can cause breathing problems, like people get asthma and people get other, and that is posture related too. But also there's knee problems, hip problems, ankle problems, and a whole range of shoulder and neck problems. And it's vast. Arthritis is another postural. After years of misusing the body, arthritis sets in. which is basically wear and tear. Yeah, so we're wearing ourselves out before time. Yeah.
So back pain, you mentioned, is universal. I have suffered with a lower disc problem. I had a MRI scan. They said it was a problem between the fourth and fifth vertebra. I'm not sure if it was cartilage or whatever, and that kind of produced sciatica, which comes and goes here and there, which is incredibly painful. As you've mentioned, you have it. If you've got this kind of condition, is Alexander's technique something that once you've got it, you can actually alleviate?
Well, you know, when I had my back problem, I also, there was no MRIs in those days. This was back in 1981, 82. I had an X-ray. They injected radioactive fluid into the spine. Yeah. They took X-rays, and there was no disc left between L4, L5, and S1. So all the three bottom vertebrae was completely worn. And what they did was they said, look, what we need to do is remove what's left of the disc and then fuse the last three vertebrae. Said you'll never be able to bend again, but at least you'll be out of pain. So I actually signed up for the operation, and it was only after talking to my father, the GP, he said, whatever you do, don't have the operation, because I'm seeing the people afterwards. And they're usually worse. So I cancelled the operation, and then eventually when I got round to doing the Alexander technique, within 6 weeks, my back was absolutely fine.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I haven't had a day of backache since.
I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? Do you think that this is something that really should be in every office and every schoolroom?
Yes, I do. Because, you see, we're spending a vast fortune on the National Health Service. A lot of it is posture related. So if you caught it early, when the children were at school, you could have a much healthier population. That would save billions. Absolutely billions.
Gosh.
And people ignore it. 49% of the population have back pain. What are we doing about it? We're just producing more and more pain-killing drugs.
Someone should have a word with the government. I'm not sure they're particularly listening, this particular government.
Well, I've tried over here in Ireland, and the politicians are just basically too busy.
Right.
Yeah.
So another massive area the book covers is stress. Now, and I'm sure most of the listeners to this podcast are no strangers to stress. I've worked in the city for 10 years. You know, it's high pressure environment, work, money. You know, going home, the mind doesn't stop thinking. For me, stress is also not just a physical thing, but it's also a mental and emotional thing. So how can Alexander technique impact all those levels?
Okay, well, one of the major principles of the technique is the body, the mind, and the emotions and the spirit are not separate, but they're intrinsically connected with one another. Okay, so when I stress myself, if I feel stress, the muscles are also going to be stressed. And if I release the muscle tension, you will feel less stress. It's as simple as that. So someone would come to me, I would work with them for 10 minutes, they would come in a stressed state, and then they would leave after half an hour completely unstressed. So you work on the physical, but most people will feel the benefits emotionally and mentally as well. They'll go out feeling calmer.
And stress again with the the NHS must deal with a lot of stuff around stress, surely.
Sure, a lot of mental issues are stress related.
Coming back to posture, I've done yoga and Pilates and martial arts, and they all have their own view on posture. What does Alexander technique say about it? Is there anything radically different than yoga, Pilates and martial arts?
I mean, you can apply the Alexander technique to yoga, and you can apply the Alexander technique to Aikido or Qigong or whatever. So it's something you actually apply to an activity. So it's not an activity in itself. You can't go and say, well, I'm going to go and do my Alexander's technique, like I'm going to go and do my yoga. It is an awareness technique, and the philosophy behind the technique is we all started with perfect posture. You go and look at any 3-year-old child, they are moving beautifully. They're standing straight, they're not standing up straight, they're not tensing their body, they just are straight. So that posture is already inside us. So all we need to do is let go of the muscular tension that's actually pulling us down into ourselves, and then the perfect natural posture just comes through. So what you do with the technique is not you don't do anything, you stop doing something. You stop doing your postural habits, and then when you stop doing your postural habits, the right posture is there already. We have a whole series of postural reflexes which are just dying to work if we let them.
Now, the book covers a whole range of things. One of the things I was very interested in, which I was surprised about, was it covers walking. Now, I would have thought that walking, naturally, we have a good posture. Is that not so?
No, not at all. Not at all. When people walk, when children walk, they actually walk fairly straight. If you watch a child walking towards you, they're very upright and they're very straight. But if you go to a shopping market or shopping mall, and you watch people walking down a corridor, they're actually walking kind of like a pendulum. They're going from one side to the other side, just like you're walking when you get off a boat. And what you're doing there is actually walking, you're pulling yourself down into a hip, and then you lift a leg, and then you pull down into the other hip, and you're just wearing your hips out.
Another one that's very interesting. I mean, a lot of people drive who are going to listen to this. Now, you say car seats cause back problems. What can we do about driving?
Well, I use a wedge. I put a wedge on the seat. If I drove, you see, I was a driving instructor, so it was the seats in the car that gave me my back problem, because I was sitting 10 years pretty much all day in a car seat. So then I realized that the cars rake back, the seats rake back, maybe as much as 15 degrees. So I just get a wedge and I put it on the seat and I make the chair flat. If I don't know how old you are, but if you went back to the 1950s, all the cars had kind of bench seats and they were much more L-shaped.
Yeah.
Now our car seats, because of the shape of the car, they're more V-shaped. So you need to get back to an L-shaped kind of seat, because that's much better for your posture.
Now, I'm a writer, and you say in the book, it's amazing how many people hold their pens when writing, and how it creates muscular tension. What can we do about writing?
Well, Alexander had his own school. He actually formed his own school because he said we teach children lots of things, but we don't teach them how to hold the pen. And you're taught with computers, you're taught Java, you're taught Microsoft, but you're never taught how to sit at a computer. So you're missing the kind of basic, the basic thing. So you're actually looking at the way you do something.
A good friend of mine is a Alexander Technique teacher, and I used to work with him. And whenever I was sitting opposite him, I always used to sit a bit more upright. Or when I was having tea with him, I was always much more aware of my posture. But one thing he told me was about the neck, and I know in your book you talk about the kind of freedom of the neck. And again, this is a big problem, isn't it, around the neck, that we create all kinds of tensions around the neck, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, the head actually weighs about 12 pounds of weight. That's 6 bags of sugar. That's a huge amount of weight. Now, most people carry their head more forward than their body, so the neck is actually under quite a lot of strain, even when you're sitting watching TV, even when you're driving using computer. Yeah. So
what about swimming? Because I noticed when I heard about this, I was thinking, when I swim, my neck is kind of head in a very strange position. Especially doing breaststroke. And I couldn't think of a way of how I could change that.
Yeah, it's more you pay attention and you just think of the neck becoming more relaxed. You just think of the neck muscles softening.
Really?
And then you're not holding the head with so much tension. Now, obviously, if you're swimming, you have to hold your head out of the water, because if you relax your neck completely, your head falls in the water and then you can't breathe.
Yeah.
So obviously there's common sense here. But maybe you can hold your head with not quite so much tension as before. So just thinking of the neck muscle softening can help that.
Right.
But there is a guy called Stephen Shaw, and he specialises in using Alexander Technique for swimming.
Now, there's a whole section of the book on sports. You mentioned swimming. Now, I was a great football fan and very into playing football and tennis. Now, I did have a knee injury from a very young age, right knee dislocated. What can I wish I'd have had some advice like this when I was a young kid. I had endless problems with my right knee. What can be done about things like football?
Well, I'll just give you a story of my son. He was a keen tennis player.
Yeah.
And he ran a lot, and every time he played tennis, he sprained his ankle. So he had some Alexander lessons from me, but also from somebody else as well. And they worked out that actually it was the way he would run differently when he had his shoes on. So what he did, he started playing tennis barefoot. And then he went to the Royal College of Art in London and he designed a shoe called the Bebo Barefoot shoe. And then when he was wearing these, he never got any problems with his ankles. So he realized that it was the way he was reacting to his shoes that was causing the problem. So just becoming aware of that. And also when you have Alexander lessons, your whole body is just much freer anyway. So when you go and play tennis, you're not or football or horse riding, you're not so likely to be injuring yourself.
This principle applies to playing musical instruments. I didn't realise that many musicians give up their careers because of aches and pains and injuries generated by the way they stand sit while playing.
Yeah, people like Madonna, people like Paul McCartney, quite a few famous musicians. But just regularly, I live in Galway, and the whole musical community. So I get a lot of people coming to me. Just holding the guitar with too much tension for too long can produce a pain in the shoulder or pain in the neck. So again, just teaching them how to sit, stand, or whatever, and hold their instrument in an easier sort of way. The pains just go away. Pains just go away. Pain is always a sign that something's going wrong. And if I can find out what is going wrong and change it, then I can eradicate the pain. There's an interesting story, actually, of George Bernard Shaw, the writer. So at the age of 80, he was riddled with pains. He had pain in his neck, he had major back problems, his hips didn't work properly, he had knee problems and ankle problems. So he booked a lesson with Alexander, not for any of these reasons, but because he had a heart problem. And the doctor's given him a few weeks to live. So he goes along to Alexander, and when he gets to the front door, he can't even get up the 3 steps to ring the doorbell. He's so frail. And everyone thinks George Bernard Shaw is just about to die and he's on his last legs. Anyway, he eventually gets into Alexander's teaching room. Alexander takes one look at him and says, "Look, I can't do anything for you unless you promise to come every day for 3 weeks." After the 3 weeks, George Bernard Shaw writes a letter, says, "Dear Mr. Alexander, I just want to thank you because all my aches and pains have gone and the doctors can't find the angina anymore. I'm walking 5 miles a day and swimming every morning, which I haven't been able to do since I was 40.
Incredible.
However, you have left me with one problem I didn't have in the first place. Now that I'm 3 inches taller, none of my clothes fit me anymore." and then he went on and lived for another 14 years. And the only reason he died, he fell out of a tree while he was pruning it. So he's up apple trees at the age of 94.
Incredible.
Yeah, I know.
Well, this is going to appeal to some people, I'm sure. Pregnancy and childbirth. Now, there's some great images in the book of this old woman with a bump in front of her, and of course, this puts a great strain on the human body, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And again, when someone's in childbirth or in pregnancy, the more tension that they have in their body, the harder the pregnancy is going to be, the harder the birth is going to be. So someone who has a more relaxed body is just going to have an easier time there. Also, back problem is a really big problem with people who are pregnant. A lot of pregnant mums get back problem, and the Eddison technique can actually definitely help with that. So it just gives people an easier time. It doesn't matter whether you're pregnant or whatever you do, it just helps you to move through life with greater ease.
So it's a beautiful book, Richard. Who's it really aimed at? Is it aimed at anyone?
Pretty much. Anyone who wants to be more conscious of what they actually do, anyone who wants to improve something. You might be a musician, want to prove your playing, you might be a runner who wants to have better performance, or you just might want to improve the way you sit at a computer. So if anyone wants to improve something, or if they have any aches or pains and they don't know why they're getting them, this might throw some light on it.
And Richard, thank you so much. Now, if anybody's interested in Richard's work, do check his website, alexander.ie. And Richard, thank you so much for your work. I'm sure it's touching many people brilliantly.
Okay, thanks, Steve.